She limped through the tavern, serving drinks like the pain didn't exist. When a cruel patron tripped her, the hooded stranger in the corner moved faster than humanly possible, his eyes flashing red as he caught her fall. What the waitress didn't know, the ancient mark glowing on her ankle meant she'd been dying for him for months, and the vampire king refused to let her suffer one more day. The tavern reeked of stale beer and desperation. Lucien had smelled worse in his 600 years of existence, but something about this particular mountain dive made his dead heart feel heavier than usual. He'd chosen the Broken Antler precisely because it was the kind of place where nobody asked questions, where a hooded stranger nursing black wine in the corner was just another lost soul passing through. The clock above the bar struck midnight. Most of the patrons were drunk enough not to notice the newcomer, who cast no shadow in the firelight. Lucien kept his head low, his pale fingers wrapped around a goblet he hadn't actually sipped from. Vampires didn't drink wine anymore. Not the grape kind, anyway. He was about to leave when he heard it. Thud drag. Thud drag. The rhythm was wrong. Uneven. Painful. His eyes, hidden beneath the shadow of his hood, tracked the source of the sound. A young woman, maybe 25 in human years, moved between tables with a tray balanced on one hand. She wore a simple gray dress and a white apron stained with tonight's chaos. Her auburn hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her face carried the kind of exhaustion that came from working double shifts just to survive. But it was her walk that made Lucien's ancient instincts flare to life. Thud drag. Thud drag. She was limping. Badly. Every step with her right leg seemed to cost her, though she tried to hide it behind a professional smile as she served ale to a table of rowdy merchants. More bread, sweetheart. One of them barked, slapping her hip as she turned away. She flinched, but said nothing, just nodded and headed toward the kitchen. Thud drag. Thud drag. Lucien's jaw tightened. He'd spent centuries learning to suppress his nature, to blend in, to not care about the fleeting lives of humans. But something about her struggle pulled at a memory he'd buried deep, a memory of another young woman, centuries ago, who'd walked with that same determined limp after sacrificing everything to save his worthless life. Clara, table 7 needs their mutton, the tavern keeper shouted from behind the bar. Coming, Mr. Brennan. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying none of the bitterness Lucien would have expected. He watched as she emerged from the kitchen carrying 3 steaming plates. The limp was worse now, more pronounced. Whatever injury plagued her right leg, she was pushing through it with sheer willpower. That's when the merchant decided to be clever. As Clara passed his table, the drunk bastard stuck his boot out directly in her path. She didn't see it in time. Her damaged leg caught the obstacle, and suddenly she was falling forward, plates flying, hot mutton and gravy erupting into the air. The tavern erupted in laughter. Clara hit the floor hard, her right side taking the brunt of the impact. She gasped in pain, and for just a second, less than a heartbeat, Lucien saw something that made his blood run cold. As her dress shifted, exposing her ankle, a symbol glowed there. Faint, crimson, ancient. A curse mark. And not just any curse mark. The exact sigil that had been forged in his name 3 centuries ago, during the Blood Wars, when a young healer had volunteered to carry his wounds so he could lead his people to victory. The same mark that should have died with her. Lucien's control snapped. He was across the tavern before human eyes could track the movement, his hand wrapped around the merchant's throat, lifting the man clear off his bench. The merchant's face turned purple, his eyes bulging as he clawed uselessly at Lucien's iron grip. "Apologize," Lucien said, his voice barely above a whisper. But in that whisper was the weight of centuries, the authority of a king who'd commanded armies of the night, the barely contained rage of a predator who'd just seen prey harmed. For an instant, just a flicker, his eyes flashed crimson beneath his hood. The merchant saw them. The whole tavern saw them. And they froze. Sorry, the merchant choked out, genuine terror flooding his features. Lucien held him there a moment longer, letting the fear sink in, then dropped him back into his seat like a sack of garbage. The man scrambled backward, his friends suddenly very interested in their drinks and nowhere else. The tavern had gone completely silent. Lucien immediately realized his mistake. He'd drawn attention, shown his nature. After 600 years of hiding, he'd nearly exposed himself over a human waitress's limp. What the hell is wrong with me? He forced himself to turn slowly, to pull the hood lower over his face, to project calm. But when he looked down at Clara, still on the floor surrounded by broken plates and spilled food, she was staring directly at him. Her eyes were green, deep green like forest moss after rain. And there was something in them, recognition? Fear? No, something else. Something that made his ancient heart twist. She looked at him like she knew him. Are you hurt? He heard himself ask, his voice rougher than intended. Clara shook her head, but the motion was shaky. I'm fine. Thank you for. She tried to stand, putting weight on her right leg, and immediately collapsed with a sharp cry of pain. Lucien caught her before she hit the ground again, his hands steadying her shoulders. The moment his skin touched hers, fire exploded through his veins. He looked down at his wrist, the one touching her arm, and saw the same crimson mark blazing there, identical to the one on her ankle. It burned like holy water on vampire flesh, searing, impossible, wrong. Then it vanished, as quickly as it had appeared. Clara gasped, jerking away from his touch. Did you feel? I felt nothing, Lucien lied, his mind racing. You need to see a healer about that leg. I can't afford. Then let me help you clean this up, he interrupted, already kneeling to gather the broken pottery. It was an excuse, a reason to stay close, to figure out what the hell was happening. Mr. Brennan stomped over, red-faced and angry. Clara, you clumsy. It wasn't her fault, Lucien said quietly, without looking up. But something in his tone made the tavern keeper swallow whatever insult he'd been about to hurl. Fine. Just clean it up. Both of you. As Brennan retreated, Clara knelt beside Lucien, carefully picking up pieces of broken plate despite her obvious pain. Up close, he could smell her, not just her blood, though that was there, sweet and intoxicating, but something else. Something old. Something that reminded him of battlefields under full moons and desperate magic cast by desperate people. You didn't have to do that, she whispered, not meeting his eyes. I'm used to it. No one should be used to cruelty. She paused, then looked at him directly. In the firelight, he saw tears brimming in those green eyes. Who are you? The vampire king who's been hiding from his own people for 3 centuries, he thought. The coward who let a young woman sacrifice herself to save his worthless, immortal life. Just a traveler, he said instead. Passing through. Well, thank you, traveler, she tried to smile, but it cracked at the edges. Though you should probably leave now. When men like that get embarrassed, they come back with friends. She was right, of course. But Lucien didn't move. Couldn't move. Because as he knelt there in spilled food and broken pottery, watching this limping waitress try to salvage her dignity, he realized something that terrified him more than sunlight or silver or holy ground. The curse hadn't died with its original bearer. It had been passed down. And this girl, this random human tavern worker, was suffering for sins she didn't even know existed. Suffering for his sins. What's your name? He asked, his voice barely audible over the resuming tavern noise. Clara, she wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. Clara Ashford. Ashford. The same name as the healer who died 3 centuries ago. Oh no. Clara, Lucien said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you always had problems with your right leg? Her expression shifted, surprise, confusion, and something else. Fear, maybe. How did you, no. It started about 6 months ago. Just woke up one morning and could barely walk. No injury, no accident. The village healer says it's like something is draining me from the inside. 6 months ago. That was when Lucien had gotten into that fight with the werewolf pack. When he'd taken a silver claw to the leg that should have crippled him. But he'd healed like always. Because she'd taken the wound instead. Do you dream? He pressed. Of battles? Of moonlight? Clara's face went white. How could you possibly? The tavern door slammed open. The merchant had returned, and he'd brought 5 friends, all armed. There's the bastard, the merchant snarled, pointing at Lucien. Grab him. Lucien stood slowly, positioning himself between Clara and the approaching men. His hands flexed at his sides, claws threatening to emerge, fangs aching to descend. Not here, he told himself. Not in front of all these witnesses. But as the first man lunged forward, Lucien saw Clara try to stand to help him, saw her leg buckle beneath her, saw her cry out in pain, and his control shattered completely. When the crimson cleared from his vision, all 6 men were unconscious on the floor, the tavern was in chaos, and Clara was staring at him with absolute certainty in her eyes. You're not human, she whispered. Lucien met her gaze and made a decision that would change everything. No, he said quietly. I'm not. And neither, it seems, are you. Clara's hands trembled as she gripped the tavern's back door frame, watching the hooded stranger who'd just taken down 6 armed men without breaking a sweat. The cold mountain air bit at her skin, but it was nothing compared to the ice spreading through her veins. What do you mean I'm not human? Her voice cracked. I'm just a waitress. I serve drinks and clean tables and limp with an injury that isn't yours, Lucien interrupted, stepping into the moonlight. He pulled back his hood, revealing features too perfect to be mortal, sharp cheekbones, pale skin that seemed to glow, and eyes that shifted between gray and crimson, depending on the angle. An injury that appeared 6 months ago without cause. Clara wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to get away from this creature. But her cursed leg had other ideas, and she stumbled against the doorframe. Lucien caught her elbow before she fell. The moment his skin touched hers, the world exploded. Fire raced up Clara's arm and down her leg simultaneously. She screamed, but no sound came out. Her vision blurred, replaced by flashes of impossible things. A battlefield drenched in silver moonlight, thousands of pale figures with glowing eyes, a woman who looked exactly like her kneeling before a throne made of bones, speaking words in a language Clara didn't know but somehow understood. I offer my blood, my flesh, my fate. Let his wounds be mine. Let his death pass to me. Let him live, though I may fall. And then she saw him, younger, dressed in obsidian armor, a crown of black iron on his head, watching the woman with an expression caught between gratitude and horror. The vision shattered. Clara found herself on the ground behind the tavern, gasping for air, her right ankle burning like someone had pressed a hot brand against it. Lucien knelt beside her, his own wrist smoking, that same crimson symbol blazing on his skin before fading to nothing. What? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. What was that? A memory, Lucien said, his jaw tight with pain. Not yours. Not mine. But ours. He reached down and carefully lifted the hem of her dress, exposing her ankle. Clara tried to pull away, but froze when she saw it. The mark was glowing again, crimson lines forming an intricate pattern that looked like a crown wrapped in thorns and chains. That sigil was forged 300 years ago, Lucien said quietly, his finger hovering over, but not touching the mark. By a healer named Ilara Ashford. She volunteered to carry a curse meant for me, a spell that would transfer any fatal wound I received to her instead. She saved my life during the Blood Wars. Ashford, Clara's heart hammered. That's my family name. I know. Lucien's expression was haunted. Ilara died, taking a silver blade meant for my heart. I thought the curse died with her. But curses bound in blood magic don't die. They pass down. That's insane, Clara breathed, but even as she said it, pieces clicked into place. The nightmares that had plagued her for months. The limp that doctors couldn't explain. The strange dreams of battles and bloodshed under full moons. You're saying I'm… what? Cursed to take your injuries? Apparently, Lucien stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. 6 months ago, I fought a werewolf pack. Took silver claws to my right leg. Should have crippled me for weeks. But I healed in hours. He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw genuine remorse in those inhuman eyes. Because you took the wound instead. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. How many? How many times have I been hurt because of you? I don't know, he admitted. I've been in hiding for decades, avoiding conflict. But even small injuries, cuts, bruises, broken bones that healed too quickly, he looked away. I never knew where they went. Rage flooded through Clara, giving her strength to push herself upright despite her screaming leg. You're telling me every time you get a paper cut, I might collapse? Every time you stub your toe, I suffer? No, Lucien's voice was firm. The curse only transfers significant injuries. Wounds that would be fatal or permanently crippling to most. The magic filters based on severity. Oh, how considerate, Clara spat. So, I only suffer when you would have died. That's so much better. I didn't know. I don't care. Clara's vision blurred with tears of frustration and fear. I don't care about your wars or your curses or your fangs or whatever you are. I just want to serve tables and save money and maybe someday open my own bakery, and instead I'm limping around taking mystical injuries for some immortal monster. The word hung in the air between them. Monster. Lucien's face went carefully blank, and Clara immediately regretted it. But she was terrified and angry, and her whole world had just been turned inside out. You're right, he said quietly. I am a monster. But I'm a monster who's going to fix this. How? Clara demanded. You said the curse was blood magic. 3 centuries old. How exactly do you plan to? She stopped because he was staring at her ankle again, where the mark had begun pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. There's a scholar, Lucien said slowly. A historian who specializes in blood curses. He lives in the old monastery, 3 days north. If anyone knows how to break this bond, it's him. And if he doesn't… Lucien met her eyes, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Then I'll find another way, even if it costs me everything. Clara wanted to laugh at the melodrama of it, but the burning in her ankle and the weight of his gaze stopped her. This creature, this vampire or whatever he was serious. Dead serious. Why? She asked. Why do you care? You've been alive for centuries. Why does one limping waitress matter? Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of lifetimes. Because Alara Ashford died in my place, and I swore on her grave that no one would ever suffer for my sins again, his jaw tightened. I've already broken that promise once. I won't break it twice. Clara studied him, this impossible being who'd materialized from legends, who defended her against cruel men, who wore guilt like a second skin. 3 days north, she asked. 3 days. I'll need to tell Mr. Brennan I'm leaving. I'll pay him for a month of lost wages, Lucien said immediately. Clara nodded slowly, her mind racing. This was insane. All of it. But what choice did she have? Keep limping through life, taking random injuries from a stranger's fights? Or take a chance that maybe, somehow, this curse could be broken? One condition, she said. You stay away from fights. No werewolves, no bar brawls, nothing. If I'm carrying your wounds, the least you can do is not collect any new ones. A ghost of a smile crossed Lucien's pale face. Deal. As Clara turned to hobble back inside and pack her things, she felt the mark pulse again, warmer this time, almost alive. In the moonlight, Lucien watched her go, his hand pressed against his own wrist where the matching symbol had burned and faded. What have I done? He thought. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about breaking a curse. It was about correcting a 300-year-old mistake. And whether he admitted it or not, the moment he'd seen Clara fall, something in his dead heart had stirred back to life. The monastery loomed against the twilight sky like a skeletal hand reaching for heaven. Clara had never seen stones so old, so weathered by centuries of mountain winds. Gargoyles with eroded faces stared down from crumbling towers, and the entire structure seemed to lean slightly, as if exhausted by the weight of its own history. "Cheerful place," she muttered, adjusting her cloak against the evening chill. Lucien said nothing, but his jaw was tight. He'd been increasingly tense the closer they got to their destination, and Clara was starting to suspect this wasn't just a casual visit to some scholarly monk. The 3-day journey had been strange. They traveled mostly at night, Lucien's preference, and he'd maintained a careful distance between them, as if afraid another accidental touch might trigger another vision. Clara's limp had actually improved slightly, which Lucien explained meant he'd avoided all injury. Small blessing. But the nightmares had gotten worse. Every time Clara closed her eyes, she saw that battlefield. Saw the woman, Alara, kneeling before a throne. Felt the phantom pain of a blade sliding between ribs that weren't hers. The monastery is run by an order that's remained neutral in vampire politics for over a millennium, Lucien explained as they approached the massive oak doors. They keep records, histories, forbidden knowledge that most of my kind would rather forget. Your kind, Clara repeated. You mean vampires? Yes. And you're what, exactly? Some kind of vampire noble? Lucien's hand paused on the door's iron ring. Something like that. Before Clara could press further, the door swung open. The man standing in the doorway was ancient, genuinely ancient, not vampire ancient. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his beard white as winter snow, and his eyes were clouded with cataracts. But when those milky eyes landed on Lucien, they widened with shock. "My lord," the old man breathed, immediately dropping to one knee. "You've returned." Clara stared. "My lord." Lucien looked deeply uncomfortable. "Brother Marcus, please get up. I'm not here in any official capacity." Official capacity. Clara's voice rose. "Who are you?" "A traveler researching legends," Lucien said quickly, shooting the old monk a warning look. "As I told you." Brother Marcus rose slowly, his expression flickering between confusion and understanding. "Of course. Forgive me. I simply mistook you for someone else," but his knowing smile suggested otherwise. The monastery's interior was exactly what Clara expected. Cold stone corridors lined with flickering torches, the smell of old parchment and older wine, and silence so deep it felt physical. Brother Marcus led them through a maze of passages to a library that made Clara's breath catch. Books. Thousands of them. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall, stretching back into shadows that torchlight couldn't reach. Scrolls and manuscripts were stacked on tables, and the air was thick with the scent of ancient knowledge. "The curse mark," Lucien said without preamble. "Blood magic binding. Transfer of fatal wounds from vampire to human descendant. What can you tell me?" Brother Marcus's expression grew grave. He gestured for them to sit at a long wooden table while he disappeared into the stacks. Clara heard him muttering, the sound of books being pulled and replaced, and then he returned with a tome so old its leather binding was cracking. "The sacrifice binding," Marcus said, opening the book carefully. "One of the darkest spells from the Blood Wars era. Show me the mark, child." Clara hesitated, then pulled up her dress to reveal her ankle. The crimson sigil pulsed in the torchlight, seeming almost alive. Marcus inhaled sharply. "By the old gods. It's active." "What does that mean?" Clara demanded. The old monk sat heavily, his fingers tracing text in the ancient book. The sacrifice binding was created during the war between vampire clans and the werewolf packs. It allowed a willing human to absorb fatal injuries meant for their bonded vampire, essentially making them immortal in battle. "Alara Ashford," Clara whispered. "My ancestor." Yes, Marcus looked up at Lucien with something like pity. She volunteered during the siege of Blackmore Keep. The spell required a blood oath, witnessed by both moon and sun, sealed with the vampire's true name and title. True name? Clara looked at Lucien. What's he talking about? Lucien was staring at the book like it might bite him. It's not important. Actually, my lord, it is, Marcus said gently. Because the curse can only be broken by the one who accepted the sacrifice. And that individual would need to be, he paused, choosing his words carefully, someone of considerable power and rank. Just say it, Lucien growled. Marcus met Clara's eyes. The spell could only be cast for vampire royalty. Kings, queens, princes of the great houses. No one else had the blood strength to anchor such magic. The library seemed to tilt. Clara turned slowly to look at Lucien, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. The way Brother Marcus had knelt immediately. The way other travelers had given them a wide berth on the road when they caught sight of Lucien's face. The authority in his voice when he'd confronted those men in the tavern. You're not just a vampire, she said slowly. You're a king. Lucien closed his eyes. I abdicated 3 centuries ago. You're the vampire king? Clara's voice climbed. The one from the histories? The blood wars? She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. You let me think you were just some random immortal. Because that's what I am now, Lucien said firmly. I walked away from the throne after Alara died. I wanted no part of a kingdom built on that kind of sacrifice. How noble, Clara snapped. And yet here I am, limping around because you got into a fight 6 months ago. Which is why we're here. Lucien stood as well, frustration breaking through his usual control. To fix this. To break the curse. Can you? Clara turned to Marcus desperately. Can it be broken? The old monk's expression was grave.
Yes.
But the cost, he looked at Lucien. My lord, the curse is sustained by your immortal essence. To sever it completely would require returning what was given. Speak plainly, Lucien demanded. She carries your death, Marcus said simply. To free her, you must take it back. And when you do, the immortality granted by the sacrifice spell will drain from you. You won't become human, not entirely, but you'll no longer be sustained by Alara's magic. Your natural vampire aging will resume. You'll become vulnerable. Silence crashed through the library. How vulnerable? Lucien asked quietly. You would age slowly, perhaps a year for every decade. Sunlight wouldn't kill you, but it would weaken you considerably. Silver would hurt more. You'd need blood more frequently. And most significantly, Marcus hesitated. You could die. A true death, not just temporary injury. Clara felt the weight of those words settle over them. This wasn't just about breaking a curse. It was about Lucien choosing mortality, or at least something close to it, to free her. There's more, Marcus continued, pulling out another scroll. The ritual itself is dangerous. It must be performed in the place where the original oath was taken. The blood sanctum beneath Blackmore Keep. The castle, Lucien murmured. My castle. The one you abandoned? Clara guessed. The one I fled, he corrected bitterly. After Alara died, I couldn't bear to stay. I left it to my generals and vanished. And they'll just let you waltz back in? Lucien's laugh was hollow.
No.
They'll try to kill me. Or worse, they'll try to make me rule again. Marcus cleared his throat. There's one final complication. Once the ritual begins, both of you will be completely vulnerable. Any wound either of you takes will affect you both equally until the curse is fully severed. If someone were to attack during the ritual, we'd both die, Clara finished. Precisely. Clara sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. This had escalated from a mysterious limp to vampire royalty and life-threatening rituals in the span of 3 days. I need air, she said, standing abruptly. She limped toward the corridor, leaving Lucien and Marcus in tense silence. Outside, under a sky full of stars she'd never seen from the valley, Clara pressed her hands against cold stone and tried to process everything. A king. He was a king. And he was willing to give up his immortality to free her.
Why?
Footsteps approached from behind. She knew, without looking, it was him. "I should have told you," Lucien said quietly. "About what I was." "Yes," Clara agreed. "You should have. Would you have come? If you'd known." She considered lying, then decided he deserved honesty. "Probably not. I would have thought you were insane or dangerous or both." "I am both." Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. "At least you're self-aware." They stood in silence, watching the moon rise over the mountains. "You don't have to do this," Clara finally said. "The ritual. Giving up your immortality. I'll find another way to manage." "There is no other way." "Then I'll live with it." Lucien turned to face her, and in the moonlight, his features looked almost human. Almost vulnerable. "I've lived too long watching innocence suffer for me," he said. "I won't do it anymore. Not for you. Not for anyone." Clara met his eyes, those strange gray-red eyes that had seen centuries of darkness. "You're really willing to die for a waitress you just met?" "I'm willing to become mortal for someone who deserves better than carrying a dead king's curse." And in that moment, looking at this ancient creature who'd given up a throne out of guilt and was now ready to give up eternity out of conscience, Clara made her decision. "Then let's go to your castle," she said, "and end this." Lucien's expression shifted, surprise, respect, and something else she couldn't quite name. Together? Together. Neither of them mentioned that they'd both probably die in the attempt. Some things didn't need saying. Blackmore Keep rose from the mountainside like a crown of shadows and regret. Clara had imagined crumbling ruins, something forgotten by time. Instead, the castle stood proud and terrible, its black stone walls polished smooth by centuries of mountain storms, its towers sharp as fangs against the dawn sky. Torches burned in windows that shouldn't have light, and smoke rose from chimneys that shouldn't have fires. "It's occupied," she breathed. "Of course it is," Lucien's voice was tight. "The vampire court doesn't abandon seats of power. They just find new kings." They'd stopped on a ridge overlooking the castle, hidden among pine trees that were probably older than Clara's entire bloodline. Lucien had been silent for most of their 2-day journey from the monastery, his expression growing darker with each mile that brought them closer to his former home. "So, what's the plan?" Clara asked. "Walk up and knock." "Actually, yes." She blinked. That was sarcasm. "I know," Lucien pulled back his hood, revealing his face fully for the first time since they'd left the tavern. In the pre-dawn light, he looked every inch the King Marcus had called him. Sharp features, commanding presence, and eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. "But I'm done hiding. If we're doing this, we do it properly." "Properly meaning what?" "They kill us at the gates." "Probably." He started walking down the ridge toward the castle road. "But vampire law is complex. If I invoke the right of return, they have to grant me audience before they can execute me." "How reassuring," Clara muttered, limping after him. Her ankle had been throbbing since they'd gotten within sight of the castle, the curse mark pulsing like a second heartbeat. The castle gates were obsidian and silver, engraved with symbols that hurt Clara's eyes to look at directly. 2 guards flanked the entrance, both pale, both still as statues, both watching the approaching figures with the unblinking intensity of predators. "State your business," the taller one demanded, his hand moving to the sword at his hip. Lucien threw back his cloak, and Clara heard both guards inhale sharply. "I am Lucien Shadowborn, first of his name, Blood King of the Northern Houses, Lord of Blackmore Keep and the Eternal Territories." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I invoke the right of return and demand audience with whoever currently warms my throne." The guards looked at each other, something like panic flickering across their pale faces. "My lord," the shorter one stammered. "We thought you were. We were told you were."
"Dead."
Lucien's smile was cold. "Clearly not. Open the gates." "We need to consult with General Kale. You need to open these gates now, or I will open them myself, and you'll learn firsthand why your predecessors feared me." Clara had never heard that tone from him before. It wasn't threatening. It was simply fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who'd commanded armies and crushed rebellions. The gates opened. The courtyard beyond was filled with vampires. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all stopping mid-activity to stare at the impossible sight of their lost king returned. Clara felt their eyes on her, predatory, hungry, confused, and instinctively moved closer to Lucien. "Stay near me," he murmured. "No matter what happens." They crossed the courtyard in silence, the crowd parting before them like water. Clara caught fragments of whispered conversations. "It's really him. After 3 centuries, the Blood King returns," and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The throne room was exactly what Clara expected from vampire royalty. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow, chandeliers dripped with black candles, and the floor was polished obsidian that reflected everything like dark water. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single piece of midnight stone, sat a vampire who radiated controlled violence. He was younger looking than Lucien, with jet black hair and eyes like frozen blood. His armor was ceremonial but functional, covered in silver markings that probably represented battles Clara didn't want to know about. "Lucien." The vampire's voice was smooth as poison silk. "How unexpected. We assumed you'd finally walked into the sun." "Sorry to disappoint you, Kale." Lucien walked forward without hesitation, and Clara limped behind, acutely aware of every eye in the room tracking her movement. "I need access to the blood sanctum." Kale's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "The sanctum has been sealed for 300 years. By your order. And now I'm unsealing it. Why?" Kale leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the throne's armrest. What could possibly bring the great Lucien Shadowborn crawling back to the kingdom he abandoned? Lucien gestured toward Clara. "The sacrifice curse. It didn't die with Alara Ashford. It passed to her descendant." Every vampire in the room suddenly focused on Clara with renewed interest. She fought the urge to hide behind Lucien. Kale stood slowly, descending from the throne with predatory grace. He circled Clara like a wolf examining prey, and she caught the scent of old blood and older anger. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The curse reborn. And you want to break it, I assume?" "Yes." "Which would require the severance ritual." Kale stopped in front of Lucien, and Clara realized they were exactly the same height. "Which would drain your immortality. Which would make you mortal." "I'm aware of the cost." "Are you?" Kale's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Because I'm not sure you understand what you're proposing. You want to break a curse that's kept you alive through countless battles. A curse that's made you nearly invincible. For her?" He gestured dismissively at Clara. "A human waitress?" "For an innocent who doesn't deserve to suffer for my past," Lucien corrected. Kale laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "My king. My noble, guilt-ridden king. Still carrying the weight of Alara's sacrifice after all these years. Will you grant me access to the sanctum or not?" "Oh, I'll grant you access." Kale's smile was cruel. "But first, you need to hear what you've missed in your 3-century vacation." He clapped his hands, and a dozen vampires emerged from the shadows, all armed, all positioned strategically around the room. Clara's pulse quickened. "The blood wars never ended," Kale said, pacing now. "They just evolved. Werewolf packs still raid our borders. Human hunters have formed militias with silver bullets and holy fire. And our enemies grow stronger every year." He turned sharply to face Lucien. "Do you know why? Because we haven't had a real king. We've had a council, a committee. And committees don't inspire fear or loyalty." "I'm not here to reclaim the throne," Lucien said firmly. "I know. You're here to weaken yourself." Kale's voice rose with passion. "To become mortal. To abandon the very power that could unite our people and crush our enemies once and for all." Clara saw where this was going. "He's right," she said quietly. "We should leave. Find another way." "There is no other way," Lucien said, not taking his eyes off Kale. "And we're not leaving." "Then let me propose an alternative." Kale spread his hands reasonably. Forget the ritual. The girl can live with the curse. Humans are adaptable. You reclaim the throne. Lead us to victory. Become the king you were always meant to be.
No.
The werewolves are planning something big, Lucian. Without you, we'll lose. Hundreds of our people will die. Then find another way to fight. There is no other way. Kale's composure cracked. We need the Blood King. We need your strength, your strategy, your immortality. And you want to throw it away for some random descendant of a dead martyr? The throne room erupted in murmurs, some agreeing, some uncertain, all watching to see how this confrontation would end. Lucian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. I've made my decision. Grant me access to the sanctum, or I'll take it by force. Kale's expression shifted from passionate to cold in an instant. You know I can't let you do that. I know you can't stop me. Actually, Kale smiled. I can. Council, vote. Do we grant the former king access to destroy himself? Hands rose around the room. Clara counted quickly, maybe a third in favor, 2/3 against. The council has spoken, Kale said softly. Access denied. Lucian's hands clenched into fists. This is not a request. And this is not a negotiation. Kale's eyes flashed red. You abandoned us, Lucian. You don't get to come back and make demands. You want the sanctum? Earn it. Take back the throne, lead us for 1 year, 1 single year, and then we'll discuss your suicide ritual. I won't rule again. Then the girl suffers, Kale shrugged. Your choice. Clara felt the curse mark burning on her ankle, felt the weight of centuries of vampire politics crushing down on her, and made a decision. I'll leave, she said loudly. I'll go back to the tavern. You don't need to fight about this. Clara, Lucian started. He's right, she interrupted, her voice breaking. I'm not worth a war. I'm not worth your throne. I'm not ubedi. Lucian turned to face her, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. You're not nobody, and I'm not negotiating with Kale. My lord, one of the council members spoke up, an older vampire with silver hair. Perhaps compromise is possible. If you could just... There is no compromise, Lucian said flatly. I will not rule again. I will not lead armies. I will not be the monster you need me to be. Then you condemn us all, Kale said. Better than condemning her. The throne room fell silent. Kale's smile was terrible. How romantic. How utterly pointless. He raised his hand, and the armed vampires moved closer. Since you won't leave peacefully and won't see reason, I'll make this simple. Guards, escort our former king to the dungeons. We'll discuss his future after he's had time to reconsider. You can't imprison me, Lucian said dangerously. Watch me. The guards moved forward, and Clara saw Lucian's eyes flash crimson, saw his fangs descend, saw his entire body tense for violence, and realized with horrible certainty that if he fought here, if he got injured, she'd collapse. They'd both be captured. Don't, she grabbed his arm. Please. Don't fight. Lucian looked at her, conflict raging across his features. Trust me, Clara whispered. We'll find another way. For a long moment, she thought he'd ignore her. Thought he'd tear through every vampire in the room to reach the sanctum. Then his shoulders dropped. Fine, he said quietly. Take me. As the guards surrounded them, Clara caught Kale's triumphant smile and knew they'd just made everything much worse. The dungeon cell was surprisingly comfortable for a prison. Stone walls, yes, but also a bed with actual blankets, a small table, and even a barred window that let in moonlight. Clara sat on the bed while Lucian paced like a caged wolf, his frustration palpable. This is exactly what Kale wanted, he muttered for the 10th time. Get me contained, wear me down, force me back onto the throne. At least we're alive, Clara pointed out, rubbing her aching ankle. The curse mark had been burning constantly since they'd entered the castle, as if sensing the proximity of the sanctum. For now, 2 days had passed since their imprisonment. Guards brought them food, blood for Lucian, bread and stew for Clara, but no one spoke to them. No visits from Kale, No council negotiations, just silence and waiting. Clara was starting to think waiting was the entire strategy. On the third night, everything changed. The cell door opened silently, and a young vampire with auburn hair slipped inside. She pressed a finger to her lips, then whispered, "General Kale has ordered your execution for dawn." Some of us still remember the old ways. Still believe a king who cares about human life is worth following. Lucien stopped pacing. "Who are you?" "Captain Vera. I served under you during the werewolf campaigns." She produced a key ring. "There's a tunnel beneath the wine cellar that leads to the forest. Take it.
Run.
Don't come back." "The sanctum," Lucien started, "is sealed and guarded. You'll never reach it now." Vera unlocked their shackles. "Please, my lord. Just survive. That's enough." Clara saw the conflict in Lucien's eyes. Duty versus survival. Guilt versus self-preservation. She made the decision for him. "Thank you," Clara said, standing. "We'll go." They followed Vera through torchlit corridors, past sleeping guards and empty armories, down into the wine cellar where dust-covered bottles sat in ancient racks. She showed them a hidden door behind a false wall, opened it to reveal a narrow tunnel carved through rock. "It exits 3 miles north," Vera whispered. "There's a village. You can disappear from there." "Why help us?" Lucien asked. Vera's smile was sad. "Because you were the only king who ever asked if we wanted to go to war. The only one who cared if we came back." She clasped his shoulder briefly. "The kingdom needs you, my lord. But it doesn't deserve you. Not anymore." Then she was gone, and they were alone in the tunnel. They walked in silence, Clara's limp echoing off stone walls, Lucien's hand occasionally steadying her when the path grew rough. The tunnel seemed endless, and Clara's leg was screaming by the time she saw moonlight ahead. They emerged into a forest of silver birch trees, their white bark glowing in the darkness. "We should keep moving," Lucien said. "Put distance between." The arrow took him in the shoulder. Clara screamed as Lucien staggered, crimson spreading across his shirt. But worse, infinitely worse, was the sudden fire that erupted in her own shoulder, in the exact same spot, as if she'd been shot too. She collapsed, gasping, clutching at a wound that wasn't physically there but hurt like it was. "Clara!" Lucien was beside her instantly, even as he bled.
No, no, no."
More figures emerged from the trees. 6 vampires, all wearing Kale's silver insignia. Leading them was a scarred warrior with dead eyes and a crossbow. "Kale's orders," the warrior said flatly. "The former king doesn't leave. Not alive." Lucien's eyes blazed crimson as he stood, putting himself between Clara and the attackers. "You want me? Come get me." They came. What happened next would haunt Clara's nightmares forever. Lucien moved like death incarnate, faster than her eyes could track, more brutal than she'd imagined possible. He tore through the first attacker with bare hands, snapped the second's neck with casual efficiency, and ripped the crossbow from the scarred warrior's grip. But every wound he took, Clara felt. A sword slashed across Lucien's ribs. Clara screamed as phantom pain carved through her side. A knife caught his thigh. Her leg buckled under invisible agony. He was winning the fight, destroying Kale's soldiers with centuries of battle experience, but she was dying by inches with every injury he sustained. "Stop," she gasped. "Lucien, stop fighting. You're killing me." He froze, realization dawning with horror. Blood covered his clothes, his face, his hands. 3 attackers lay dead. 2 circled warily. The scarred warrior smiled. "Interesting," the warrior said. "The curse works in real time. Every time he bleeds, she suffers." How poetic. He raised his sword. "Let's test the limits, shall we?" He lunged at Lucien, who had to choose, defend himself and hurt Clara, or take the blow and possibly die. Lucien caught the blade with his bare hand. Blood poured from his palm, and Clara felt her own hand explode with agony, though no wound appeared. She was sobbing now, curled on the forest floor, feeling every cut, every bruise, every breaking bone that Lucien absorbed. You want to kill me? Lucien's voice was raw.
Fine.
But you'll kill her too. Is that what Kale wants? A dead human woman on his conscience. The warrior hesitated, looking at Clara's writhing form. That hesitation cost him his life. Lucien moved with desperate speed, ending the fight in 3 brutal seconds. The last 2 attackers fled into the trees, leaving their dead behind. Then Lucien collapsed beside Clara, both of them bleeding, him physically, her sympathetically, their hearts pounding in sync. I can feel it, Clara gasped. Your heartbeat. It's like we're connected by more than the curse now. Lucien's face was pale even for a vampire. The curse is evolving. The more we're together, the more we interact, the deeper the bond becomes. He pressed his hand to her chest, and she felt a shock. Our hearts are beating together. Exactly together. Clara looked down at her ankle. The curse mark was glowing brighter than ever, pulsing with their shared rhythm. And when she looked at Lucien's wrist, his mark was visible too, no longer fading, permanent now, blazing. What does this mean? She whispered. It means if I die, you die. And if you die, he couldn't finish the sentence. Then we're tied together. Completely. They lay there in the blood-soaked grass, breathing in unison, hearts beating as one, and Clara realized the curse had become something else entirely. Not just a transfer of wounds anymore, a fusion of lives. We need to reach the sanctum, Lucien said, struggling to sit up. Before this gets worse. Before we become so connected that separating us is impossible. Clara nodded, but as she tried to stand, her leg gave out completely. The limp had progressed to near paralysis, every injury from the fight stacking on top of the old wounds. I can't walk, she admitted, tears of frustration streaming down her face. Lucien, I can't. He lifted her without a word, cradling her against his chest despite his own injuries. Then I'll carry you. You're hurt too. I've been hurt worse, his jaw set with determination. We're finishing this. Together. As he walked through the forest carrying her, Clara felt every step through their bond, his pain, his exhaustion, his absolute refusal to give up. And underneath it all, something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. When we get out of this, she murmured against his shoulder. If we get out of this, I'm opening that bakery. I'll help you, Lucien said. I don't know anything about baking, but I can lift heavy flour sacks. Clara laughed, actually laughed, despite everything. A vampire king working in a bakery. That'll look normal. I was never very good at normal anyway. Behind them, the forest rustled with movement. Kale's forces regrouping. Time running out. Ahead, somewhere beyond these trees, lay a castle full of enemies and a ritual that might kill them both. But in this moment, sharing heartbeats and hope, Clara realized something that terrified her more than curses or vampires or death itself. She was starting to care about him. Really care. And caring made everything infinitely more complicated. Lucien, she whispered. Yes. Don't die. His arms tightened around her. I'll do my best. They disappeared into the darkness, 2 souls bound by ancient magic, racing toward either salvation or destruction. They reached the blood sanctum through sheer stubbornness and Vera's secret help. The young captain had found them at dawn, brought them back through forgotten passages that even Kale didn't know existed, tunnels carved during the original construction of Blackmore Keep, when paranoid vampire lords built escape routes into every wall. Now Clara stood before a door that shouldn't exist. It was carved from a single piece of black stone, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. The curse mark on her ankle burned so intensely she could barely stand, even with Lucien supporting her weight. Beyond this door, Lucien said quietly, there's no turning back. The ritual, once started, must be completed. If we stop halfway, the curse will consume us both. Cheerful, Clara managed, though her voice shook. Their shared heartbeat was hammering now, fear and determination mixing into something sharp and desperate. Vera stood guard at the tunnel entrance, her sword drawn. I can hold them off for maybe 20 minutes. Kale knows you're here. He's gathering forces. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Lucien placed his palm against the door. It recognized him, recognized his blood, and swung open with a groan that sounded almost alive. The sanctum was beautiful and terrible. A circular chamber carved entirely from obsidian, with a domed ceiling that somehow showed the night sky despite being deep underground. Constellations moved across the black stone, alive with ancient magic. In the center of the room stood a raised platform with 2 indentations, one human-sized, one slightly larger. Ritual beds, Lucien explained, helping Clara toward them. We lie down. I speak the words of severance, and the curse will begin to unravel. It'll pull the immortality gifted by Alara's sacrifice from my blood and redirect it back through the bond. When that happens, you'll be free. And you'll be mortal. Close enough, he helped her onto the smooth stone bed. It was surprisingly warm, humming with power that made her teeth ache. Clara watched as Lucien lay down beside her, close enough that their hands could touch between the 2 platforms. The curse marks on both their bodies blazed with crimson light, illuminating the chamber like twin flames. Lucien, Clara said, her throat tight. Why are you really doing this? He turned his head to look at her, and in the magical light, his face was open in a way she'd never seen before. Vulnerable. Young, despite his centuries. Because I've spent 300 years running from responsibility, he said simply. From guilt. From connection. I let Alara die for me, and I've been punishing myself ever since. But punishing myself meant you suffered instead. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. You're not a penance, Clara. You're a person. And you deserve to live without carrying my death. Tears slid down Clara's cheeks. You're not a monster. Maybe not anymore. Outside, they heard shouts. Steel clashing. Vera screaming a warning. They're coming, Clara whispered. Lucien's jaw tightened. Then we start now. He closed his eyes, and when he spoke, it was in a language Clara didn't know. Ancient, guttural, each word seeming to resonate through the stone itself. The curse marks erupted. Pain beyond anything Clara had experienced tore through her body. It felt like every injury she'd ever taken for Lucien was surfacing at once. The limp in her leg, the phantom arrow wound in her shoulder, a dozen smaller cuts and bruises she hadn't even noticed. But more than that, she felt something pulling from deep inside her, trying to rip out a piece of herself that had somehow become essential. Lucien was screaming too, his back arching off the stone, crimson light pouring from his wrist and chest. The immortality that had sustained him for centuries was being forcibly extracted, and his body was fighting it with everything it had. Their hands gripped tighter, the only anchor in a storm of magic and agony. The sanctum doors exploded inward. Kale strode in, a dozen soldiers behind him, his face twisted with fury. Stop this. Stop this right now. Can't, Lucien gasped between screams. Already. Started. Kale rushed toward the platform, but the moment he crossed into the ritual circle, crimson fire erupted around him. He staggered back, singed and furious. You fool. Kale shouted over the magical chaos. You're throwing away everything. Our survival. Our future. Our war. Your war. Lucien's eyes snapped open, blazing red one last time. I never wanted your endless violence. Clara felt it then, the moment the curse began to truly break. It was like a chain snapping link by link, each one releasing a fragment of pain, a piece of shared suffering. She saw flashes of Lucien's life, centuries of battle, of blood, of lonely nights wondering if he'd been right to run. She felt his guilt, his grief, his desperate need to matter for something other than destruction. And he felt her, a short human life filled with small dreams and quiet strength. Her hope for a simple bakery, her kindness to cruel customers, her refusal to become bitter despite circumstances that would have broken others. Their lives, for a moment, were completely one. "I see you," Clara whispered. "I see you," Lucien whispered back. The curse shattered. The explosion of light threw Kale and his soldiers against the walls. The ritual beds cracked down their centers. And Clara and Lucien were lifted by pure magic, suspended in the air as 3 centuries of binding spells unraveled in seconds. Clara's ankles stopped burning. The phantom wounds vanished. Her leg, her shoulder, every ache that wasn't truly hers gone. She felt suddenly, brilliantly whole in a way she'd never experienced. But Lucien. He was screaming as fangs retracted, as his skin lost its supernatural pallor, as centuries of vampire immortality drained away, like water, through his fingers. He looked younger somehow, but also more fragile, more real. The light faded.
They dropped.
Clara hit the stone hard but alive, healed, free. She scrambled toward Lucien, who lay motionless on the cracked platform, his chest barely moving. "No," she breathed, pressing her hand to his chest. His heartbeat was there but weak, fluttering like a dying bird. "No, you don't get to save me and then die. Lucien, stay with me." Kale approached slowly, staring at his fallen king with an expression caught between grief and rage. "What have you done?" he whispered. "What have you done?" "He freed me," Clara said fiercely, cradling Lucien's head. "He chose compassion over power. That's what he's done." Lucien's eyes flickered open, gray now, fully gray, no trace of crimson left. "Clara, I'm here. I'm here, and I'm healed. You did it." "Good," his smile was weak but genuine. "Worth it. Don't talk like you're dying." "Not dying," he interrupted softly. "Just mortal. Feels strange." Vera pushed through the soldiers, dropping to her knees beside them. "My lord, we need to move you. Get you somewhere safe." "Stand down." Kale's voice cut through the chamber. Everyone froze. The general stood over them, his face unreadable. For a long moment, Clara thought he'd order their execution. Finish what the ritual started. Then Kale knelt. "You gave up everything," he said quietly, looking at Lucien with something like wonder. "For her. For a principle. For the belief that power isn't worth innocent suffering," he bowed his head. "I called you weak. I called you a coward for running. I was wrong." "Kale," Lucien started. "The kingdom needs a king who would sacrifice immortality for a stranger," Kale interrupted. "Not one who would sacrifice strangers for immortality." "I see that now." He looked up, and his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "Forgive me, my lord. Forgive us all." Around the chamber, one by one, the soldiers knelt. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she held Lucien, watching this ancient vampire receive the loyalty he'd never asked for by finally proving he didn't want it for the wrong reasons. "I'm not staying," Lucien said firmly, struggling to sit up. "I meant what I said. I won't rule again." "Then teach us," Kale said. "Teach us to rule the way you would. With honor. With mercy," he smiled slightly. "With the courage to give up power when it costs too much." Lucien looked at Clara, question in his eyes. She squeezed his hand, their heartbeats still synchronized, she realized, even without the curse. Some bonds went deeper than magic. "Maybe just for a while," she said softly. "Until they learn. Until they understand. And then you help me open a bakery." Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the near-death experience, Lucien laughed. Actually laughed, the sound echoing through the sanctum like hope made audible.
"Deal," he said.
As dawn began to creep across the sky visible through the sanctum ceiling, Clara realized the most shocking thing of all. The sunlight didn't hurt him anymore. Lucien noticed too, staring at his hand as pale golden light touched his skin.
No burning.
No pain. Just warmth. "The curse really is broken," he breathed. "You're free," Clara whispered. "We both are." And in the ruins of a ritual that was meant to save one life, Surrounded by vampires learning to kneel for the right reasons, two souls found something neither had expected. A new beginning. Lucien didn't wake for 3 days. Clara sat beside his bed in the castle's healing chambers, watching his chest rise and fall with the uncertain rhythm of new mortality. The vampire physicians had done what they could, but they'd never treated someone transitioning from immortal to human before. No one had. His body is confused, the head healer had explained, an ancient vampire named Thessaly with silver braids and knowing eyes. For 600 years, his blood knew exactly what it was. Now it's remembering how to be fragile, how to need rest, how to heal slowly. Clara understood fragility. Her own body was still adjusting to the absence of the curse. Her leg, her perfectly healthy, pain-free leg, felt almost foreign. She kept expecting the limp to return, kept bracing for phantom wounds that never came. Freedom felt strange. On the morning of the 4th day, Lucien's eyes opened. "Clara?" His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. She was beside him instantly, her hand finding his. "I'm here. How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by an entire cavalry." He tried to sit up, winced, and settled back against the pillows. "Is this what mortality feels like? Everything hurts." "Welcome to being human," Clara said with a watery smile. "Or close enough." Lucien studied his hands, no longer pale as marble, but carrying a faint warmth of color. "I can feel my heartbeat," he said with wonder. "Really feel it. Not just the motion, but the effort of it. Each beat working to keep me alive." "Your heart has good company." Clara placed his hand over her chest, where her own heart beat steady and strong. "Mine's been keeping the same rhythm." "The curse may be broken," Lucien murmured, "but some bonds remain." A knock interrupted them. Cale entered, looking exhausted but determined. Behind him came a delegation of vampire nobles, their expressions ranging from curious to horrified. "My lord," Cale began, then caught himself. "Forgive me."
"Lucien."
"The council has been debating your situation. Debating whether to kill me now that I'm vulnerable?" Lucien's tone was dry. "Actually, debating whether to build you a statue." Cale's smile was wry. "You've become something of a legend in 4 days. The king who sacrificed immortality for a human stranger. It's spreading through every vampire territory from here to the coast." One of the nobles, a severe woman with dark eyes, stepped forward. "Some call it noble. Others call it insanity. But all agree it changes everything."
"How?" Clara asked.
The woman turned her gaze to Clara, studying her with unnerving intensity. "For centuries, vampires have survived by being stronger, faster, more ruthless than everyone else. We've built our entire society on the foundation of immortal superiority." She gestured to Lucien. "He just proved that our greatest king values mercy over might."
"It's
destabilizing." "Good," Lucien said firmly. "You needed destabilizing." Cale moved to the window, where early morning light streamed through. "There's more." Word reached the werewolf clans. "Their alpha has requested a meeting. Says if vampires can value life over power, perhaps old wars can end." Lucien blinked. "They want peace. They want to talk about peace." "There's a difference." Cale's expression was complicated. "But it's a start. A start you made possible." Clara felt Lucien's hand tighten around hers. She knew what he was thinking. This was exactly the trap he'd feared. Success. Recognition. The pull back toward leadership and responsibility. "I told you," Lucien said quietly. "I'm not staying. Once I've recovered." "We know," Cale cut him off. "And we'll honor that." But first he pulled something from his coat, a crown. Not the heavy iron monstrosity from the throne room, but something simpler. A circlet of dark metal, unadorned except for a single red stone. "This was Alara's. The healer who gave her life for you." Clara gasped. She'd seen it in her visions, seen Alara wearing it as she'd knelt before Lucien 3 centuries ago. "I don't understand," Lucien said, his voice thick with emotion. "We found it in the archives," Cale explained. She was offered a reward for her sacrifice. She chose this, a crown that would mark her as someone who'd served with honor. She wore it until the day she died. He held it out to Clara. We think it should go to her descendant, the woman who broke the curse that Alara created. Clara stared at the circlet, her hands shaking. I can't accept. You can, the severe noblewoman interrupted. You should. You've suffered for our king's survival. You've earned recognition. The council voted, Kale added softly. Unanimously. We'd like to name you Sunblessed. An honorary title. A vampire who walks in daylight is already a miracle. A human who freed him from ancient magic is a legend worth honoring. Tears streamed down Clara's face as Kale gently placed the circlet in her hands. It was lighter than she expected, warm to the touch, and the red stone seemed to pulse with faint light. Alara would be proud, Lucian whispered. Of both of us. The next week passed in a blur of healing and adjustment. Lucian grew stronger each day, learning the limitations of his new form. He couldn't move with supernatural speed anymore. Couldn't hear heartbeats from across the castle. Needed actual sleep and food, though thankfully not blood. That craving had vanished with his fangs. I'm somewhere between vampire and human, he explained to Clara as they walked the castle gardens under afternoon sun. Actual afternoon sun that warmed rather than burned. Thessaly calls it a hybrid state. I'll age, but slowly. Maybe a year for every decade. I'm stronger than humans, but weaker than vampires. And apparently, I can eat regular food again, which is both exciting and terrifying. Clara laughed. What's terrifying about food? I haven't tasted anything but blood for 6 centuries. What if I hate everything? What if bread is disgusting? Then my bakery plan is doomed. They walked in comfortable silence, Clara wearing Alara's circlet, Lucian moving with the careful awareness of someone relearning their own body. Guards watched from a distance, giving them privacy, but staying vigilant. I've been thinking, Clara said eventually, about what Kale said, about peace talks and new beginnings. So have I. You want to stay, don't you? At least for a while. Lucian stopped walking, turning to face her fully. I want to make sure they don't waste this opportunity. The werewolves agreeing to talk. That's unprecedented. If I can help establish real peace, help them understand that strength isn't just violence, he trailed off. But I meant what I said. This isn't forever. I'm not their king anymore. What are you then? He smiled, a real smile, reaching his eyes. A teacher, maybe.
A guide.
Someone who made enough mistakes to help others avoid them. And after? After, Lucian said, taking her hands, I help a brilliant woman open the best bakery in the kingdom. I learn to make bread without burning it. I discover what normal life feels like. Clara's heart, her freed, healthy heart, swelled with emotion she didn't quite know how to name. That sounds perfect. There's just one problem. What? I'm falling in love with you, Lucian said simply. And I don't know if that's the curse bond lingering, or gratitude for saving each other, or something real. But I needed to say it before another day passed. Clara's breath caught. She'd felt it too, the pull toward him that went beyond magic or shared trauma. The way her heart literally beat in sync with his. The comfort of his presence and the excitement of his smile. I don't know either, she admitted. If it's real or residual magic or just 2 people who survived impossible things together. So what do we do? Clara looked up at this ancient vampire who'd chosen mortality, this king who'd chosen compassion, this man who is still learning how to be fragile. We wait, she said. We help your people find peace. We figure out who we are, without the curse. And then she smiled. We see if our hearts still beat together when there's no magic forcing them to. Lucian's expression was tender and sad and hopeful all at once. That sounds wise.
I'm occasionally wise.
Occasionally? He raised an eyebrow, a gesture so humanly playful it made her laugh. They stood in the garden as the sun began its descent, 2 souls learning to exist without the magical chains that had bound them. Around them, Vampires whispered about the sun-blessed human and the mortal king. Word spread of peace talks and new treaties, and the legend of a sacrifice reversed. But in that moment, Clara and Lucien were just two people holding hands in the sunlight, wondering if love could grow where curses once lived, and hoping desperately that the answer was yes. 6 months changed everything. The peace talks with the werewolf clans lasted 3 brutal weeks of negotiation, compromise, and centuries of hatred slowly unwinding. Lucien sat at those tables not as a king, but as a witness, someone who'd sacrificed everything for peace, and could therefore speak with authority no crown could grant. The treaty was signed under a full moon, with both vampire and werewolf blood sealing the parchment. No more raids. No more border wars. Just wary coexistence, and the hope that time would soften old wounds. Clara watched from the gallery, wearing a Lara's circlet, as ancient enemies shook hands. After that, Lucien kept his promise.
He taught.
He guided. He helped Kale and the council transform a kingdom built on fear into something that resembled actual civilization. But he didn't rule, didn't sit the throne, didn't wear the crown. He was learning, he said, how to be just Lucien. And Clara was learning how to be just Clara, not a curse-bearer, not the sun-blessed, just a woman with dreams and a perfectly healthy leg. The castle had become strange to both of them. Too big, too formal, too filled with history and expectations. So they left. "Are you certain?" Kale asked on their final morning, standing in the courtyard as dawn broke over the mountains. The general looked older somehow, carrying leadership's weight on shoulders that had spent centuries avoiding it. "Very certain," Lucien said, adjusting the pack on his back. He wore simple traveler's clothes now, no armor, no insignia, nothing marking him as special. "You don't need me anymore. You never really did." "We needed the example," Kale corrected. The reminder that power should serve something greater than itself. He clasped Lucien's shoulder. "Thank you for that. For everything." Vera approached with a small wooden box. "For your bakery," she said shyly, handing it to Clara. "Seeds from the castle garden. Herbs for flavoring bread. My mother was human. She used to bake with these." Clara accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. "Thank you. For saving us. For believing." "You saved yourselves," Vera said. "I just opened a door." As they walked through the gates of Blackmore Keep for the last time, neither looked back. The castle would stand for centuries more, would house new leaders and new legends. But it was no longer theirs. They were free. The village of Millbrook sat in a valley 3 weeks south, small enough to be overlooked by vampire politics and werewolf territories alike. It had a market square, a river, and a vacant building that had once been a bakery before the previous owner retired. "It's perfect," Clara breathed, standing in the dusty interior, sunlight streaming through windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. "It's a disaster," Lucien said, but he was smiling. "We'll need to rebuild the ovens, replace the floors, probably reinforce the entire." "It's perfect," Clara repeated firmly. They worked through summer and into autumn. Lucien discovered he was terrible at baking but excellent at heavy lifting and dealing with difficult suppliers. Clara learned that running a business was harder than surviving curses, but infinitely more rewarding. The nightmares faded. The phantom pains vanished completely. And slowly, so slowly Clara almost didn't notice, their synchronized heartbeats became their own again. Still complementary, still drawn to each other, but independent. Individual. Proof that what they felt was real, not magical residue. On the day they opened Clara's kitchen, the lines stretched around the block. Word had spread about the human baker and her mysterious partner. Some whispered he was nobility in hiding, others claimed he was a reformed vampire, but mostly people just wanted the bread that smelled like heaven and tasted better. Clara served customers with a bright smile, moving easily on 2 healthy legs, while Lucien managed the accounts and occasionally emerged from the back room looking flour-covered and bewildered. "How do you make it look so easy?" he asked after the dinner rush, collapsing into a chair. I followed the recipe exactly, and my loaves came out like stones. Baking is art, not science, Clara said, sitting beside him. You'll figure it out. You have time now.
Time.
The luxury of it. Years stretching ahead without war or curses, or impossible choices. As winter approached, a messenger arrived from Blackmore Keep. Clara recognized Vera's handwriting on the sealed letter. Peace holds. Kale rules with wisdom learned from watching you. The werewolf Alpha's daughter is courting one of our nobles, scandalous and wonderful. Your legend grows, though we tell everyone you're just living quietly somewhere, baking bread. The kingdom thanks you, but more importantly, we release you. No more sunblessed. No more obligations. Just two people who deserve happiness. Live well. Clara showed Lucien the letter as snow began falling outside their window. He read it silently, then folded it carefully and set it aside. No regrets, she asked. About giving up immortality? The throne? 600 years of power. Lucien looked at her, and his eyes, fully gray now, fully human, were clear. Not even one. Liar, Clara teased. You miss the speed sometimes. The strength. Maybe a little, he admitted, especially when hauling flour sacks. But I don't miss the isolation. The weight. The distance between me and everything real. He took her hand. I don't miss being a monster pretending to be noble. You were always noble. You just forgot for a while. They sat in comfortable silence as the bakery cooled from the day's baking, snow painting the world outside fresh and clean. Clara? Lucien said eventually. Yes. My heart still beats with yours. Even though the curse is gone. Even though we're free, he turned to face her fully. I don't think that's ever going to change. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Good tears. The kind that came from happiness too large to contain. Good. Because mine refuses to beat without yours nearby. Is that a medical condition? It's called love, you ancient idiot. Lucien laughed, that surprised, delighted sound that still seemed to shock him whenever it emerged.
Love.
Such a small word for something so terrifying. Are you afraid? Terrified, he admitted. But in a good way. The way that means you're alive and things matter and tomorrow is worth seeing. Clara stood, pulling him up with her. Through the window, she could see villagers hurrying home through the snow, lights beginning to glow in windows, the world settling into evening peace.
Come on, she said.
Let's close up. We have a whole lifetime of tomorrows to plan for. As Lucien locked the door and Clara extinguished the lamps, something caught her eye. The first rays of tomorrow's dawn were already brightening the eastern horizon, and when she looked at Lucien, really looked, she saw no fear in his face. No instinct to flee the coming sun. Just anticipation. Want to watch the sunrise? She asked impulsively. With you? Always. They walked into the snow-covered street, hand in hand, and waited for dawn. When the sun finally broke over the mountains, painting the world in gold and rose, Lucien stood in its full light without flinching.
No warning.
No pain. Just warmth. A small crowd had gathered, watching the man and woman standing in the sunrise, and someone whispered the story about the vampire king who'd traded eternity for empathy, about the cursed waitress who'd saved him by letting him save her, about two people who'd chosen each other over destiny. The story spread. It would spread farther still, to neighboring kingdoms, across continents, through generations. The legend of the vampire king and the sunblessed. The tale of a curse broken by sacrifice, of immortality exchanged for love, of power surrendered for peace. But the real story, the true story, was simpler. It was about a man learning to be mortal and a woman learning to be free. It was about choosing gentleness in a world that rewarded cruelty. It was about two broken souls healing each other, one sunrise at a time. And it was about a small bakery in a forgotten valley, where the bread was always warm, the welcome was always genuine, and love proved stronger than any curse ever forged. Clara squeezed Lucien's hand as the sun climbed higher, and he squeezed back. 2 hearts. 1 rhythm. No magic required. Just choice and hope, and the courage to build a new life from the ashes of an impossible past. The world had learned an important truth. Even immortal kings could change. But Clara and Lucien had learned something better. Happiness didn't require crowns or castles or centuries. Sometimes it just required flower, sunlight, and someone whose heart beat in time with yours. And that was more than enough.